Can't decide and torn between a romantic, comedy, action, or an indie film to watch for the weekend? Well. Golden State Media Concepts Movie Podcast is your ultimate guide to the latest movies. Join us as we dissect the latest on the blockbusters. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Movie Podcast.
Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Movie Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Elizabeth Aaron. Happy Tuesday, everyone. Do you find the weeks are flying by? Earlier on, when sheltering in place, I had trouble keeping track of the days. Now I know the days, and I just find time is going at a clip. If you're like me, after several months of being at home, you've been craving some new movies to watch, so today, I'm going to talk about some of the newest releases available to stream on Netflix. Before we dive in, though, I want to talk about movies and why we even care about them. Do we watch them just for entertainment, or is there something more? In an earlier podcast, I think I talked about how movies give us an experience. They help us live through something and gain some insight. Maybe we grow, maybe we change. Something is different as a result of having seen the movie. I think this is my 7th podcast, and while I've made some movie recommendations, I can't say I've talked about any that you must go see today, and I haven't talked about any that you should just skip. So we'll see if that changes today. But I think about how movies take our time and energy and attention. They require us to piece things together, to figure things out, to make sense of a story so we can actually own it for ourselves. And when a movie falls short, I feel like it's an insult to the audience's intelligence. There can be all kinds of reasons why a movie doesn't completely succeed. But is that an excuse? What if you went to have surgery and the surgeon was just having a bad day? How would you deal with that? I think the business of storytelling should be as important as that. Movies reach such broad audiences that they can impact a society. With every movie, there is an opportunity to make a difference. And when a movie falls short, I feel like it's wasting everyone's time. There's also something to be said about art. Movies and stories can be created in an artistic way, and just that creation can move people. Even if the movie is not fantastic, if at least the actors and the director and the producer, they go for something. You can pick up on that. You can pick up on that energy. So there's at least some redeeming quality about it. In doing this podcast, my hope is to save you time so that you know which movies are worth watching, but also to help you get more out of the movies that you do watch. Hopefully you can see another perspective and you get more out of the time that you're actually putting in as you watch it. So I wanted to say that because if you're going to be listening to my podcasts, and a shout out to my colleagues who are also doing movie podcasts, Casey and Shub. I know I want it to be worth your time and for you to get the most out of watching movies. Okay, I just really wanted to say that. So today we are going to be covering in the first segment of the show the movie that was #1 in streaming on Netflix this weekend. It's a brand new Netflix original psychological thriller called Fatal Affair, which landed on Netflix on July 16th. And I'll share if I think it deserves that #1 spot. In the second segment of the show, I'll be talking about the movie Dark Skies, which is a horror sci-fi fantasy, which originally came out in 2013 but came to Netflix on June 24th. In the third segment of the show, I'll be talking about Goldie, a social issues drama that was released in February and landed on Netflix on June 21st. Then stick around for the last segment of the show when I'll be talking about a bunch of the upcoming movie releases coming to Netflix over the next month or so. Okay, let's dive on in. As I mentioned, the first movie I'm going to talk about is called Fatal Affair. This is a Netflix original, and based on my research, They started pulling the project together around last October in 2019, and it just hit Netflix this last week. As I said, it was on July 16th. And so, with people wanting new things to watch, it makes sense that they'd go to the newest thing on Netflix. And as I said, this was in the number 1 watched movie spot on Netflix over this last weekend. So this movie is rated TV-14, so there's some sex and language in it, so be careful of whether there's kids around if you choose to watch it. It's an hour and a half long. It's a psychological thriller. The director is Peter Sullivan, and the cast includes Nia Long, Omar Epps, and Stephen Bishop. The director of the film, Peter Sullivan, co-wrote the screenplay with Rashida Garner. He has been a director and has produced many TV movies, and a lot of them are Christmas movies. Nia Long, who plays the protagonist, Ellie Warren, you've seen her in movies like Boys in the Hood, Made in America, Soul Food, Alfie, and Love Jones. She's been on a lot of TV. She is a 3-time NAACP award winner, and in 2014, she got the award for Best Actress for the movie The Best Man Holiday at the Acapulco Black Film Festival. Omar Epps plays David Hammond, who is the nemesis in this movie, and you know him especially from the TV series House. He had a major role on House, and he has himself won NAACP Image Awards, one of which is for Outstanding Supporting Actor in a Drama Series for House. And Stephen Bishop plays Marcus Warren, Ellie's husband, and he's been in movies like The Company We Keep, Moneyball, The Trap, and he's also been on a lot of television. On a personal note, part of this movie takes place in San Francisco, which is my neck of the woods. So if you hail from the Bay Area, it could be extra fun for you to watch. I also found out that the director grew up in a town right near where I grew up in Massachusetts. That was kind of neat. You may like this movie if, and this may give away a little bit about what I'm going to say in my review, you just want to watch something new. You like kind of soap opera shows where you get to watch beautiful people on the screen. You want a few surprises, and you don't care if there's a major depth or meaning to the story. Netflix's description of the story is, a lawyer is caught up in a terrifying game of cat and mouse when a drink with an old friend escalates into an obsession that jeopardizes everyone she loves. To dive in a little deeper, David Hammond has a thing for Ellie Warren. They met in college, but she was dating her boyfriend, now husband, Marcus. So David ended up marrying someone else, but not only did it end in an awful divorce, she and her new boyfriend were mysteriously murdered. Next thing you know, 20 years after college, Ellie arrives at work at her law firm only to find David Hammond there. He is an expert at researching information and data, and the company has hired him to help Ellie on the last case that she's taking before she goes off to open her own practice. David persistently looks for opportunities to spend time with Ellie, and at last they meet up for drinks, and she confides to him that after being married a long time, that sometimes she can feel like her husband is a stranger. Well, he takes that as a hint that she is definitely open to having a relationship with him, but she reiterates that she's committed to her husband. But David is obsessed with her and keeps finding ways to use his technical expertise and research expertise to always be 2 steps ahead of her. He keeps her on edge, manipulates her and people close to her, and she starts to investigate him and learn about his character. So she gets something on him, he gets something on her, and the story escalates until things get kind of out of control. I don't want to spoil it in case you do choose to watch it, but I need to start off the bat to say that this movie is a huge disappointment. Making a movie is a team effort, and no matter what your role, your aim is to create something original, something that no one has seen before, and to make it memorable so that the story moves you. There was so very little in this movie that was original. And in terms of psychological thrillers, I've seen variations of just about everything that was used in this movie. There were so many holes in this movie that there are times that I just laughed out loud even if it was meant to be serious. Frankly, when a movie is such a disappointment, I get angry. I get frustrated when it wastes my time. Now I will give you that the movie kept me pretty engaged, especially through the first half. And I was still engaged in the second half, but that's when most of the story started falling apart. And where was the problem? Well, the acting was pretty good. These are good, experienced actors, award winners. They were fun to watch, but there's only so much good actors can do to rescue a poor script and poor directing. I think the script and the directing failed them. So I'm going to dive into some of the things that really disappointed me, that I feel didn't hold the story together. So to start with, the protagonist is a lawyer, and she's about to open her own practice. There's nothing about her that makes you think that she has any criminal intentions. So, the polar opposite of a successful lawyer would be someone who has great integrity. Which means if they make a mistake, they will come clean about it pretty easily. Truth is what they're all about. When Ellie meets up with David Hammond, she drinks a little too much, and they start going at it. But she calls it off. She recognizes that was just a mistake, and that while it may have awakened something in her, because at the moment her marriage isn't feeling as solid as she'd like it, she knows that it's the wrong thing to do. She sets her boundary, she goes off. And then from then on, we start seeing her putting extra effort into her relationship with her husband, and it's paying off. And you'd think that maybe out of integrity, she would actually come clean with her husband, so that they could move forward and nothing would have to be held back. But no, that's not what happens here. For her, it's this terrible secret. And if you've been married for 20 years and you are aiming to improve your relationship, then there's no reason to hold back that information. Chances are the husband has looked at other women himself. And the movie didn't give us enough background on Ellie to justify her keeping this secret and for it to be such a big, weighty deal. So from the get-go, there is already a flaw in the movie. I did not believe the premise. And there are a lot of twists and turns, but many of them we've seen before. And they happen unrealistically easily. For example, when Ellie decides that she needs to find out more information about David, she finds out where he lives. And she goes into his apartment building, and she goes to the front desk, and she says to the person that she had stayed the night, and that she forgot something in David's apartment, and she was wondering if she could get a key to go in. What security desk, especially in today's world, would just hand over a key, especially if they hadn't seen whether the person had signed in, that there was any proof? Well, this security person asked for no ID, just handed her the key, and said, "Yeah, I've been there before. I understand." That just doesn't happen. So, okay, she gets the key, and she goes up to David's apartment, and she snoops around. She knows that he's out, probably for a while, and she locates some important information. I'm not going to go into it, but then, of course, he comes home, and she has to hide, and he happens to get a phone call that makes him leave just as he would have been about to find Ellie. There was not enough suspense. It was not believable. It seemed completely contrived just so the movie would have a twist. Another example is Ellie's best friend has gotten to know David, and they have been seeing each other. There's a point where David ends up doing something that hurts the friend, and Ellie happens to show up at her friend's apartment at that time. She had already called her friend. There wasn't a need for her to conveniently show up, and she did, and she wants to help her friend, so she starts screaming, "Help, help! There's nobody else in her friend's apartment. There's nobody there." She is an intelligent woman. Why she didn't just take her cell phone and call emergency, I don't know. And then after this happens, the police do come, and Ellie asks the officer if her friend is going to be okay. Ellie was there the entire time. She knows how the friend is going to be doing. And she's asking an officer who is not a medical person. None of this adds up. And there are more holes in the story. The end is a disaster. I'm going to do my best to not give any spoilers, but I don't know how to review this movie without talking about some of the things that happened at the end that just don't add up. There's a point where Ellie and her husband, her daughter who's home from college, and her daughter's boyfriend are over. They're preparing a Thanksgiving dinner. First, I don't know why it has to be Thanksgiving. There's no good reason for it, and in fact, it makes what's happening next a little less plausible. As they're preparing food, Ellie gets a text message from her assistant saying that there's a client who needs Ellie to sign some papers before the holiday. Ellie says that she is going to be just a few minutes. She's going to drive what seems probably 20 miles back to San Francisco to her office to sign these papers, and her husband questions this. But she said, oh, no, it'll be fast. If you know the San Francisco Bay Area, traffic at rush hour is terrible. Traffic the day before Thanksgiving is even worse. There's no way it will take just a few minutes. And I thought, well, maybe this was Thanksgiving Day, because they're actually preparing the food. But that didn't make sense either, because the text said that the papers had to be signed before the holiday. Also, this movie is filmed in 2020. People are talking on cell phones. This is the modern age. What assistant in today's day and age wouldn't get a document to Ellie electronically so she could sign it electronically? There's just absolutely no reason she needed to go to the office at a holiday time. Now, Ellie proceeds to go to her office, and of course she can't find the papers. She's not sure what's going on. And so she looks around, and I'm not going to give it away, but she trips over a body. And she gets a message with David threatening her family. Ellie then calls a police detective who she knows, who helped her family earlier for reasons I won't go into. And she tells her that she got this threatening call and that she needs to send police to her home. This is the evening before Thanksgiving. Ellie reaches this detective directly at the office. The detective knows exactly who she is. She remembers her. And she knows the exact address where to send the police officers. There's just no room for these actors to be human. The plot is overtaking the plausibility of this story. As the movie comes to a finale, there are just more questions about why David does the things that he does, how he happens to seem superhuman. Oh, and something that I didn't mention earlier, David Hammond is in therapy. Therapy is all about unearthing anything unconscious that isn't working. It just doesn't make sense that if he's getting some kind of treatment and his therapist has any clue, and we see that she probably does, that this behavior would not be caught and he wouldn't be stopped early. Or he wouldn't be going to therapy in the first place. It just doesn't make sense. So there's not a lot of redeeming value in this movie. Entertaining to some degree. And when these holes start building up more and more towards the end, I started watching it more for the different holes that were showing up than for what the story actually held. Not a sign of a good movie. I was really disappointed. When I see that something is #1 on Netflix, I expect more. Something else I want to note about this movie is that it's pretty much an all-black cast. And it puts the cast in a rich home, a rich apartment building, rich offices. And not to say that that isn't possible, but based on what we are experiencing in the world today with regard to Black Lives Matter, we see that there's a great disparity between what Black people earn and what people who are white earn. And it just brought up the question as to what was trying to be accomplished by providing this kind of setting. Is this to provide a bar of hope for what Black people could potentially earn and have? Was this meant just to be pure fantasy? I don't have the answer, but I think it is a question that is worth raising. So I think you have a sense of what I liked and what I didn't like. So would I recommend it? Nope. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being a fantastic, flawless movie, I'd give this one a 2 or 3, somewhere around there. So watch at your own risk. Now stay tuned for the next segment of the show, when I'll be looking at the movie Dark Skies after the break.
Want to know the latest and hottest music hitting the airwaves? Don't be left out. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Music Podcast. It keeps you on the loop with everything you need to know from pop, rock, hip-hop, and the top 40. And we'll throw in news of your favorite artists, concert and tour dates, and so much more. Listen no further, because this is the gold standard in music podcast.
Thanks for joining in for the second segment of the show. I am your host, Elizabeth Aaron, and in the last segment, I talked about the movie Fatal Affair. I'm now going to discuss the movie Dark Skies. Dark Skies landed on Netflix's platform on June 24th. This is a movie, though, that came out in 2013. It's an hour and 37 minutes long, and it is rated PG-13. The movie was written and directed by Scott Stewart. He has 8 credits for directing, including the movies Legion and Priest, and most recently he's been a director as well as executive producer on a pilot. It's for a young adult supernatural drama called Siren. And for the cast, the movie stars Kerry Russell, Josh Hamilton, and J.K. Simmons. Kerry Russell has won a Golden Globe for her performance as an actress in a television series drama for the series Felicity, and she was nominated a number of times for Best Performance by an Actress in a TV series drama for The Americans. She's been in both television and movies, and is known for the movies The Upside of Anger, Waitress, August Rush, and Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. She plays the mother in Dark Skies. Josh Hamilton plays the father. He's a winner of a Daytime Emmy Award for Outstanding Performance in a Children's Special for the CBS School Break Special, and he's won a number of awards at film festivals. His movies include J. Edgar, Seagirl Run, and Tesla. And J.K. Simmons, who's an Oscar Award winner for the Best Performance by an Actor in a Supporting Role for the movie Whiplash, plays Edward Pollard, who is an expert on extraterrestrials. This movie is a horror sci-fi fantasy. On a personal note, this is not my favorite genre. There's so much suspense and sense of danger that I'm usually just relieved when these kinds of movies are over. When I first saw the description of the movie, I was a little bummed. I wasn't really in the mood for scary. But then I saw that it starred Kerry Russell and J.K. Simmons, whom I like both quite a bit, so I was willing to give it a chance. I will say that this movie feels more like it's a TV movie, or it did at first. It grew on me. After I had seen Fatal Affair, I felt like this was much higher quality and that it could be more passable for a movie theater than I first thought. Funny how having some perspective can change your point of view. Netflix's description of this movie is, a couple has trouble convincing friends and neighbors that an alien is entering their home each night to terrorize their children. This isn't quite accurate. They don't try to convince anyone, but their lives are turned upside down. At the opening of the movie, there is a saying by Arthur C. Clarke. It says, 2 possibilities exist. Either we are alone in the universe or we are not. Both are equally terrifying. In this movie, the terrifying part is that apparently we are not alone. In the beginning, we get a setting that we are in a suburban neighborhood and people are going about doing their regular things, riding bikes, having pool parties, it's summer, they're doing a barbecue, and then we hone into the family that is the focus of this movie. The family are the Barretts. There's Daniel, the father, who's desperately looking for work because they are behind in their mortgage. There's Lacey, the mother, who is a real estate agent, and there's one house in particular she is having a really hard time selling. And then there are 2 sons. Jesse is just turning into a teenager, he's into girls, he's hanging out a little bit with the wrong crowd, he's experimenting. And then there's Sam, who is really a young kid. The movie really starts drawing you in when Kerry Russell seems to just be waking up in the middle of the night and she keeps discovering these strange things in the house. One night she finds food half-eaten all over the place. Another night she finds all these dishes and bottles stacked in a strange way, and they can't figure out who's doing it. At first they suspect it's the boys, then they suspect maybe there was a robbery, but the doors are locked. They end up getting a security system. The police can't account for it, and the security alarm company can't either. And then even weirder things start happening, around animals coming into their yard. And each member of the family having some kind of situation where they lose time, or they feel like they're out of their body and don't have control. Eventually they all discover in some way damage is being done to their bodies. And finally, thank goodness for the internet. Kerry Russell does some research and finds out that there's some similarities between what they're experiencing and what families have experienced that claim something is going on that has to do with extraterrestrials. Daniel, the dad, ends up getting a video security system thinking this is going to solve everything. It does give some clues that there is something going on, but they still can't quite get to the bottom of it. At first he refuses to entertain the idea that his wife Lacey has come up with that this could have to do with extraterrestrials. But over time, enough things start happening that appear as she had shown him online that he agrees to go with her to talk to this expert on extraterrestrials. The expert, Edwin Pollard, lets them know the kind of challenge that they're in for, and the kinds of things that are going to help keep the family safe and all together. Because it sounds like the extraterrestrials are about to accomplish what they've probably set out to do the entire time. So the Barretts prepare for all-out war. I won't spoil it for you, but there is indeed a fascinating twist at the end that is worth holding out for. I find it hard to take movies of this genre seriously, maybe because I don't want what happens to be true. For me, when I see a scary movie, the adrenaline rushes, and I scream a lot. I prefer not to see these movies by myself, and when I'm streaming them, I tend to take lots of breaks. The acting in this movie is quite good. I believe that Kerry Russell and Josh Hamilton are married. They make a pretty good couple, actually. And the fact is, when all of these things that happen are truly not real, they have to convince you that they are, and they do that. I was highly engaged, and there's a lot of suspense. This movie sets you up to wonder what is going to happen next, what is actually happening. It draws you in, laying down a clue after clue after clue, and you keep trying to work out in your mind what is actually happening just as the protagonists are. You also feel the fatigue they're experiencing. They are up all night trying to catch whatever is wreaking havoc on their home and putting their family members in danger, and you start feeling their exhaustion. And when any good news comes, for them it is a huge reason to celebrate. Anything to help take the edge off is a good thing for them. This movie is scary because things are happening to this family that they are not in control of. Earlier on in the movie, we see how the two brothers each have a separate room in the home, but they stay connected by talking on a walkie-talkie, and the older brother will read scary stories to his younger brother before going to bed. One of the ideas that comes up is that there is a Sandman who comes, I think, from the moon, who likes to take people's eyes. And this plays over and over in your mind, wondering if there's some reality to this. Is there a connection between the story and then what is truly happening to this family? And I would say there are things in this movie that I have never seen before. Now, I don't know if this is because this is not a genre that I watch super frequently, but this quest for this family to figure out what is going on is a ride that I am convinced I need to go on with them. Sometimes when it comes to some of these movies, I'll just turn it off. I'm done. But this one kept me wanting to find out what was at the bottom of it and what was going to happen. I liked Kerry Russell in the role of the mom. She plays such a normal mom, which I think helps make the circumstances that she's in seem that much more extraordinary. Josh Hamilton has that ordinary guy feel as well, which works for similar reasons. But at the same time, I'm not completely accepting his closed-mindedness around what is going on and his choice to be stubborn about what to look into. You would think that being the father and wanting to protect his family, he wouldn't stop at anything to make sure that his family was safe and that he should be open to trying absolutely everything. I wasn't convinced that he cared so much about the judgment of others that that was more important than the caring for his family. One of my favorite scenes is when the husband and wife finally go to see the character played by J.K. Simmons. This is Edwin Pollard, and he is anything but stereotypical of the kind of person that you would think would be an expert on extraterrestrials. You have a sense that he is tired and worn out hearing about the stories that are going on. He knows all of them, he's been tracking them for years, and he knows that he is going to be the one to report news that is not going to be taken well by a family. He tries to provide some hope, and yet he is very realistic about what they're up against. He gets when people come to him, they know that they are at their wits' end. And they may not completely trust him. They may think he's a little bit off his rocker, because who believes in extraterrestrials? The timing of their visit to him is great, though. Either they are going to successfully protect their family, or they're not. They are up against a wall. And Pollard explains this. So you have a lot of hope. You are cheering on this family. You want them to beat the extraterrestrials. This leads to the climax of the movie, and I'm not going to give anything away, but you are on the edge of your seat. Every second, there's something new that is going on. The camera can flip from one person to the next person, and you want to know what's going to happen next. How are they going to deal with it? It really gets your heart racing. The script of this movie is tightly written. There are lots of twists and turns, and it's clear that they knew what the plot points were early on in the movie that were going to get some kind of resolution later in the movie. I could trace what those plot points were, and I was surprised frequently about what the outcomes were. So that really worked in the movie. Other things that worked were the other characters. There were friends who were leading normal lives, who couldn't quite understand some of the strange behavior that was happening with this family. And you get to see the family looking at each incident that happens as its own incident. They haven't connected the dots, and the friends haven't either. There's a point where something incredible happens with regard to animals at their home. I'm not going to spoil it for you, but after it happens, Lacey Barrett calls her friend and just said this really weird thing happened. And the friend is trying to help her figure out what could have happened. And all this normalizes everything. It keeps creating this baseline of what normal life is like and how weird what is happening to them actually is. But the weirdness and the stakes of the weirdness keeps getting higher and higher. And it's like they're in a pressure cooker and they can't quite get a grip on how this is escalating to the point that they're in grave danger. But what I don't completely buy is that they aren't kind of putting two and two together, and that they aren't relying on their friends to help them and to give them some level of support. They don't want to look crazy to anybody around them. And yet, if they've been in this neighborhood for years and are close friends with a lot of these people, and they know how they were, if there is a change, you'd think these people would be more concerned than judgmental. And if Pollard knew about all these families, it makes you wonder, why wouldn't there be some kind of connection network for all these families to help each other through these circumstances? And there are some scenes that are just plain unrealistic. Granted, a lot of this is far out, and I did stay engaged and kind of fall for what was going on. I'm not going to go into it, but there is a scene where the father gets into a situation where he bleeds a lot. And this is just not taken seriously. It's like the blood dried up, and that was it. I also didn't completely believe the policeman who came to investigate. He kept shirking his responsibility in a way, and you'd think that he would really want to get to the bottom of this and ensure that this family is safe. Something else that I wonder about this film has to do with the music. The music is very right on target in terms of helping to create the suspense and the potential horror that is going to happen. I just wonder if that music hadn't been included, would the movie be scarier? I think that music amps up a sort of a false sense of being scared. And if what is happening to this family was to actually happen to a family in everyday life, they wouldn't have this music in the background. And they'd be trying to get to the bottom of what was happening in a very kind of real, mundane way. I think that could actually have, in some ways, more of an impact because people could relate to it. It would be strange if what was happening to this family was happening to you in your home. I'm not sure you'd kind of be on tiptoes peeking around the corner or waking up in the middle of the night and wondering what is going on in the same way. At the beginning of the show, I talked about movies and how they provide a way for us to learn something or change or grow. And so the question I'm putting to myself now is, did this movie achieve that? What I learned from this movie is what it can feel like to feel unsafe, how fortunate I feel that I have some level of control over my life. And I actually know somebody who claims they had some kind of encounter with an extraterrestrial. I have no idea if it was ongoing or anything like this, but this did give me food for thought. Something else I've noticed about this film, which isn't connected per se to the story itself, but this is a very white neighborhood, it's a white family. The dad goes to interviews for jobs at very white firms. I just think there's a missed opportunity here to include people of color in these kinds of movies. Overall, what I liked about this movie is that it really seemed grounded in an average family's life. and that you got to see what a family would need to do to survive under these kinds of circumstances. It helped give me a new perspective on what family life could be like. I also think it's interesting, just off the top of my head, so Kerry Russell in The Americans played a woman who is undercover as a spy. And in this movie, she plays a woman who's undercover as someone whose family is being attacked by extraterrestrials. So she seems to have a strength in playing women who are not quite what they seem to be. And that was just an interesting thought that I had. So on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being an absolutely amazing, fantastic movie, I'd give this one a 6 or 7. I think it's highly entertaining. And it's a great one to cuddle up with your honey with, because you have to hold their hand because you're so scared. You might not want to see this one late at night if you want to avoid having nightmares. But it is a fun watch, and I do recommend it.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome to the third segment of the show. I am your host, Elizabeth Aaron, and in the last segment, I talked about the movie Dark Skies. I'm now going to discuss the movie Goldie. Goldie is a drama about social issues. It was filmed in 2019, but it is new on Netflix as of June 21st. It's rated TVMA, as in mature audiences, because there is some nudity and language, and it's about an hour and a half long. It was written and directed by Sam DeJong. He's mostly directed short films until now, and he's won a couple of awards at different film festivals. And the movie stars Slick Woods, George Sample III, and Angela Grisel. This is the first major film for Slick Woods to star in. George Sample III has been in the movies Cronies, Hunter-Gatherer, and Person to Person. And this is Angela Grisel's first movie. The description Netflix has for this movie is, when a bold teen mounts a gritty pursuit to dance in a music video, she must also evade child services so she can keep her younger sisters together. This movie reminded me of another movie that I had seen on Netflix. It's called The Inevitable Defeat of Mr. and Pete. It's a coming-of-age story about two boys in the inner city whose mothers are taken away by the authorities, and they team up to be able to thrive through the summer. This movie has some similar themes. To give you more of a rounded view of the story, the focus is the character Goldie. She's recently turned 18, and her dream is to get a big break as a dancer. She wants to be able to earn enough money to help her family get out of the shelter that they're living in and on their feet, and probably more than that. Goldie is full of excitement and confidence. She has this sense that the world is her oyster. At the opening, she runs to this community center. It's where they have a talent show. It looks like every weekend. And she jumps up on the stage and she dances and she gets cheers from the audience. She has two little sisters and she calls one of the little sisters up who likes to do drumming and makes sure that everybody is cheering her on. She's just a great mentor and really looks out for her little sisters. She loves them to death. As she dances, this image pops up and it shows her with long blonde hair, these yellow glasses, a big furry yellow coat, and a very revealing yellow outfit. And it's clear that This is who she feels she is. It's the outward expression of how she feels inside and is the glamorous persona she believes she has within her. So right away, we are wondering if she is going to live up to becoming this persona. Back at home, which I mentioned is a shelter for homeless people, we see her mom, her two sisters, and her mom's boyfriend all sleeping in the same room. And at some point we see that they have a shared bathroom. They have no privacy, very little money. They're just scraping by, but at least they seem to be in a safe place. Next, Goldie is running happy-go-lucky through the streets, and she's meeting up with someone named Jay. And Jay is a member of a team that is putting together a music video, and Goldie wants in. She feels like this is going to be her lucky break. She has the sense that once you're in a music video, you are going to rise to high success. So he's on the fence about having her join in. But finally he says she can at least do an audition. If she can do a tape of her dancing and send it to them, then they'll see if she can be part of this project. After meeting up with Jay, she heads to what appears to be her job. She works in a used clothing store, and at some point I think we find out that she only works there part-time. But she's late to work, and her boss calls her in, and he says she's been late 5 times. That's enough, she's fired. She begs him to keep her, and then she behaves like a rebel, putting her feet on his desk, placing demands on him. She, it seems, hasn't really found out how to get into someone's good graces. Instead of winning him over, he ends up calling security, and there's a whole fun scene of whack-a-mole in the clothing store, where the security guards and Goldie are ducking and jumping up through different clothing racks, and suddenly we see there's more than one Goldie and more than one of each of the security guards. It's hilarious, and I've never seen anything quite like it. So just for the artistry, that's a really fun thing to check out. She has her eye on the beautiful yellow furry jacket that was in the image of her fantasy. And she also goes to a store to find that revealing yellow outfit that was also part of her fantasy image. Goldie has a challenging relationship with money and with buying things. There's a sense that in order to get ahead in the world, she needs certain things, but she doesn't have the money to afford it. And so she has to figure out how to negotiate that for herself. I don't want to give away what happens, but this is a theme that keeps cropping up over and over. And sometimes we see she feels she's entitled to get something just because the system seems to be stacked against her. And other times she's willing to respect what the requirements are in order to get a piece of clothing. But what she seems to believe is the closer she can get to appearing like the image in her fantasy, the more successful she thinks she's going to be. She goes back home, and she discovers her mother and her mother's boyfriend dealing drugs. And she is fit to be tied. She does not want her young sisters to be exposed to this kind of behavior. Here she's showing once again her protective instincts, and she has a certain level of integrity. After this confrontation, Goldie's mother and sisters help her get ready for the big audition that she's going to tape and submit. Then she and her sisters go to the roof of the building, and her sisters record her dancing. When they come back down, her mother tells Goldie that her boyfriend has accused her of stealing money. I'm not going to tell you whether she did or didn't. But regardless, she claims that she didn't. And then the boyfriend comes down and confronts Goldie, grabs her, the mother tries to protect her. Things just go wrong. It's a highly traumatic event, and security has to come and break things up. And if that wasn't bad enough, in a few more minutes, the police come and take her mother away. And we're not actually sure why she's being taken away, but we eventually find out this is not the first time, and that likely she's not going to be let out of custody anytime soon. The big promise that's made is that Goldie will make sure that none of the girls end up in child protective services and that they can all stick together. So this is the big dramatic setup for what ensues in the rest of the movie. Suddenly Goldie, who has a chip on her shoulder and feels entitled, finds herself with huge responsibility. She needs to figure out how to make money, she needs to make sure her sisters are safe, and she needs to figure out how they're all just going to survive. At first she goes around to different people that they know, seeing if anyone can help. I think her hope is that they will be rescued. But things don't happen quite that easily. 3 girls are a responsibility that people don't necessarily want to take on, nor are they in circumstances that they can actually afford it very easily. Now, some good news comes along, which is Goldie finds out she gets to be in the music video. Her big break is coming, and she believes if she can afford to get that great yellow jacket and all the elements that will make her fantasy idea of herself a reality, she is just going to be a star and all their problems are going to be over. The only thing is, she needs money in order to make that happen. She goes through tremendous effort, danger, emotional ups and downs, trauma, trying to make this happen. Meanwhile, everyone who she is going to for help says that she should call Child Protective Services, and she refuses. It is not in line with her promise. I don't want to give away the ending. Suffice it to say, though, this is really Goldie's first time where she's faced with dire circumstances and she is the one who is completely responsible. She has to grow up really fast. And ultimately, that is what this movie is about. When push comes to shove, survival is the most important thing. And sometimes survival requires you to face where you are at in reality and make tough decisions. This is what Goldie is faced with. And we get to see her under these circumstances and pressures. How is she going to be? Is she going to change and meet the demands that are placed on her? Or is she going to stay the same and continue to live as if she is entitled to whatever she wants? A few reflections on Goldie. First, she has such charisma. I actually believed in her possibility to go far. That with her confidence and style, she actually could overcome her obstacles and get the big break that she's looking for. That Slick Woods pulled this off on this role is incredible. It's one thing for the movie to have this setup where there's this teen who is shooting for the stars. It's another thing for the actress to actually create a character that you believe she believes that in herself. It made it natural for the audience to want to root for Goldie and to believe that what she wanted is possible. That is great work. There are also times where we get to see the inside scoop on Goldie. She's not always telling the truth, and she'll almost do anything to get the thing that she wants. And the audience gets to wrestle with what kind of character is Goldie really? Is she fair? Is she just? On one hand, she's so protective of her sisters. She's such a good person in that way. She stands up for them. She encourages them. She's a mentor for them. She'll protect them. On the other hand, we see that Goldie is willing to do whatever it takes to get the thing that she wants, even if it might hurt people, be unfair to them, or not be in their interest. Also, something about Goldie is she seems to have this amazing upbeat attitude for someone living in pretty dire circumstances. She just keeps on chugging along and doing the best she can. But as she gets faced more and more with the different circumstances that exhaust her, we see her get knocked down and how it sobers her. The script has done a great setup of showing how Goldie has to overcome so many obstacles to get the thing that she wants. And eventually we get to see if the thing that she wants is what she actually thinks it is. There are a number of really great scenes where she is trying to connect with people to get help. For example, she and her sisters go to visit a former teacher, and she is very close to this teacher and is hoping that the teacher can help out. But when the teacher proposes a response to how to give them the most help that doesn't work for Goldie, Goldie leaves. Then Goldie goes to find her former workmate, Eli. And they visit Eli and his grandmother, and we find out that Eli has actually been released from prison, and he doesn't want to get into any more trouble. And yet the things that Goldie is proposing are walking a thin line as to whether he could get away with something or not. Then Goldie takes her sisters to see her father. She has a different father than her sisters. And they show up and there's this beautiful, awkward, real scene where her father wants to help, but he's married and has a baby and his own new family now. And there's only so much that he can do. And his wife doesn't want Goldie and the sisters to stay. So he's at odds about how to wrestle with this, how to help her yet not help her. And as these rejections build up, things get more and more discouraging. But Goldie shows her strength and she continues to persevere. At one point, she finds a place for her sisters to stay overnight while she herself goes to see an old boyfriend who owes her some money. This is an amazing scene, super difficult to watch. You can see that Goldie is in a lot of emotional pain. and yet she perseveres. She uses her street smarts to get what it is that she needs, and she gets away. But after that, we see the impact that it has had on her, and I think she herself starts to wonder if the effort that she's going through to make her fantasy come true is actually worth it. When I spoke earlier about the movie Fatal Affair, in which most of the cast was black, and they were set in a very rich situation, well, this is the polar opposite. Again, this is just about all an African American cast, but it seems grounded in the reality that we know more about based on what we're hearing about through Black Lives Matter. It provides a hard look at the struggle of black families, how the system is stacked against them, and how sometimes it seems like they're hanging on only by a thread to survive and hold together. Something I appreciate about this movie is how artistic it is. From the opening, we see lots of color and animation, and it looks like it's Van Gogh's broad strokes that bring energy into Goldie's world. And the story seems to be divided into chapters based on who it is that Goldie's approaching for help. In many ways, this movie took a simple idea and turned it on its head. A basic fantasy turned into a young woman's ultimate way of survival. I really liked this movie. It was real, it was raw, the acting was great, I believed everything that was happening. When I saw this was one of the recently released movies on Netflix, I had never heard of it, and I didn't know what to expect. And when I saw the very beginning of it, it was easy to think this might be just some fluffy movie that didn't have a lot of meaning. It proved to be the opposite of that, and it was a really delightful surprise. If I had a problem with any of it, I would say at first there was a lot of confusion for me about who the characters were. It was a little bit hard to tease that apart. The woman who ended up playing the mother of Goldie and the two girls, at first I didn't think she was the mother. I didn't make that connection. She seemed more like a family friend. Although there is a moment when Goldie and her sisters go off to make the video, and the camera hones in on the mother's face. It was so beautiful. Her face just glowed and showed so many different emotions. You could see all of the different feelings that she was having about her daughters and the difficult circumstances that she was in. I just loved that particular moment. It's one to look for. This movie has a lot going for it. And if I was to compare it to Fatal Affair, granted they're very different movies, I would choose this one hands down. It's so much richer emotionally, and you get attached to the characters, you care about them, you care about what happens. And arguably, there's quite a bit of suspense in this movie. You want to know what's going to happen to Goldie. You want to know if she and her sisters are going to survive on the street. You want to find out what's going to happen with her mother. And I would take this real suspense over the contrived suspense of Fatal Affair any day. So yes, this movie was a big, happy surprise to me. And would I recommend it? On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most excellent movie, I would give this an 8. I definitely recommend it. And I took a look, and I didn't see this movie listed in Netflix's Black Lives Matter collection. I think this would be a great addition to that collection. I think it belongs there. Now stay tuned for the final segment of the show, when I'll be sharing a bunch of the upcoming movie releases coming to Netflix over the next month or so.
Watching TV has changed over time. Streaming has become the new norm. That's why Golden State Media Concepts television podcast dives headfirst to the world of cord cutting. Want to be on the loop of what's hot in Netflix? Or if it's not a preference, what about original shows in Hulu? We've got you covered. Join us as we fill in the blank and talk about movies to stream and what show you should be binging. This is the Golden State Media Concepts television podcast.
Welcome to the last segment of the show. I am your host, Elizabeth Aaron. In the prior segment, I looked at the movie Goldie. In this segment, I'm going to share a bunch of the upcoming movie releases coming to Netflix over the next month or so. As we're sheltering in place, it makes a lot of sense that we want new material to watch. Sometimes it's a new movie that we look forward to when we aren't really clear what our future is going to bring. So I did a bit of research, and I found out that a bunch of movies are going to be put on the Netflix platform over the next month or so. And we're going to talk about these based on the order of those that are landing soonest to those that are landing farther out. Some of these don't even have dates of when they're going to land. They just are qualified as sometime soon. But I have a list of things that are going at least through September. The first movie I'm going to tell you about is coming really soon, later this week, on July 24th. And the name of the movie is called Offering to the Storm. This movie is the final chapter of the Invisible Guardian trilogy. I'm not familiar with this trilogy, but it makes me want to be curious about what the other episodes are, and maybe there's a chance to watch those prior to seeing this one. So to give you Netflix's summary of this movie, in Pamplona, capital of Navarra, Amaya Salazar is called to investigate the death of a stillborn baby girl and the arrest of the child's father. According to the grandmother of the family, the father tried to run away with the body of the baby while uttering some strange sayings about an offering. The baby has some red marks on her face that indicate that she has been murdered. The grandmother also talks about a magical creature, a nightmarish evil being that immortalizes people and prevents them from waking up after their sleep. It is the Inguma, the one who takes your life away while you are asleep. The investigation of this case will take Amaya and her team to discover some procedural irregularities in similar cases that occurred in the nearby valley of Batzan many years ago and that reveal an unusually high number of cases for such a small area. Meanwhile, the murderer, Baraseta Gui, who is transferred to another prison by Judge Marquina, is found dead in a cell due to a drug-induced coma done with somebody's help. Offering to the Storm is a gripping and hair-raising thriller in which the plot accelerates towards a surprising ending in which Amaya must face the true origin of the events that have ravaged the Batzan Valley for years, even if an impressive snowstorm tries to bury the most devastating truth. This sounds pretty interesting. I like that this is happening in a different place, and I wonder if the characters here are the same characters that were in the earlier episodes of this trilogy. Time will tell. The next movie on the list is also coming out on July 24th, so you'll have some choices. This one is called The Kissing Booth 2. The summary that Netflix provides is Elle Evans, played by Joey King, just had the most romantic summer of her life with her reformed bad boy boyfriend, Noah Flynn, who is played by Jacob Elordi. But now Noah is off to Harvard, and Elle heads back to high school for her senior year. She'll have to juggle a long-distance relationship, getting into her dream college with her best friend Lee, played by Joel Courtney, and the complications brought on by a close friendship with a handsome, charismatic new classmate named Marco, played by Taylor Sakar Perez. When Noah grows close to a seemingly perfect college girl, played by Maisie Richardson Sellers, Elle will have to decide how much she trusts him and to whom her heart truly belongs. The director and screenwriter is Vince Marcello, and he returns for the Kissing Booth sequel based on the Kissing Booth books by Beth Reekles. A fun fact that the first Kissing Booth movie also starred Molly Ringwald, and the sequel is coming out 2 years after the first movie. And if you do a quick search online for the Kissing Booth 2 trailer, you will see that the trailer is indeed available, so you can get a sneak preview. The next movie coming to Netflix is arriving on July 31st, and I hope I say this accurately. The title is Rat Ekeli High. So Rat Ekeli High is the story of a high-profile murder, according to Netflix. It takes place in a small town in India that sends a tough yet narrow-minded cop on a twisted investigation. And as he navigates deeper into the dark past of a toxic patriarchy of the victim's family, he finds he's having to battle the inherent patriarchy within himself in the process. This movie is already listed on the Internet Movie Database, and it has a little bit different description. It says the film follows a small-town cop who is summoned to investigate the death of a politician, which gets complicated by the victim's secretive family and his own conflicted heart. You can see a trailer on IMDb, and it is starring Nawazuddin Siddiqui and Radhika Apte. I hope I'm getting those names correct. The director is Hani Trahan, and while he has cast a number of movies, this appears to be his directorial debut. Next up is a movie coming out a week after that on August 7th, and the title is Work It, and here is the summary from Netflix. When Quinn Ackerman's admission to the college of her dreams depends on her performance at a dance competition, she forms a ragtag group of dancers to take on the best squad in school. Now she just needs to learn how to dance. Quinn Ackerman is played by Sabrina Carpenter. It also stars Jordan Fisher and Keenan Lonsdale. The director is Laura Taruso. She was a producer on the movie Hello, My Name is Doris. She's directed a good number of short movies, and she directed the award-winning movie Good Girls Get High. There are a lot of dance movies out there that tend to be pretty formulaic. It'll be interesting to see how this one holds up. Another movie that's going to be added to Netflix on August 12th is called Kunjon Saxena, The Cargill Girl. This film, according to Netflix, is inspired by the life of a fearless young officer who made history by becoming the first Indian female Air Force officer to fly in a combat zone during the 1999 Cargill War. It is written and directed by Sharan Sharma, and this is her directorial debut. It stars Janvi Kapoor and Pankaj Tripathi. Then coming up on August 14th, the movie Project Power. According to Netflix, here's the summary. On the streets of New Orleans, word begins to spread about a mysterious new pill that unlocks superpowers unique to each user. The catch? You don't know what will happen until you take it. While some develop bulletproof skin, invisibility, and super strength, others exhibit a deadlier reaction. But when the pill escalates crime within the city to dangerous levels, a local cop teams with a teenage dealer and a former soldier fueled by a secret vendetta to fight power with power, and risk taking the pill in order to track down and stop the group responsible for creating it. This movie is directed by Henry Joost and Ariel Schulman, and it looks like these two have paired up for some time and have directed a number of short movies before this. And it has a great cast. It includes Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Jamie Foxx, and Dominique Fishback. You've seen Joseph Gordon-Levitt in Inception, Looper, and Lincoln. And Jamie Foxx won an Oscar for Best Performance by an Actor in a Leading Role for the movie Ray back in 2005. And you've seen him in such movies as Django Unchained, The Soloist, and Dreamgirls. And Dominique Fishback has been in TV shows like Blue Bloods and Show Me a Hero. I like how this one has the essence of some kind of superhero movie, and it will keep you guessing. The next movie coming your way is going to be on August 21st, and this is called The Sleepover. And according to Netflix, this is a family adventure comedy. A summary of the story? Clancy and her kid brother Kevin discover that their seemingly normal stay-at-home mom, Margot, is actually a former high-end thief in the Witness Protection Program. When both their mom and dad are kidnapped and forced to pull one last job with an ex-flame of Margot's, the siblings must team up to rescue their parents over the course of one action-packed night that they'll never forget. The Sleepover is directed by Trish C., who was the director on Pitch Perfect 3. The cast includes Sadie Stanley, Maxwell Simkins, Madeline Eckerman, and Ken Marino. And all of these actors have quite a bit of experience acting on television. The next movie landing on Netflix is coming on August 28th. The title is Unknown Origins. This movie is written and directed by David Galan Galindo, and it's also written by Fernando Navarro. The synopsis of the story? In Madrid in 2019, a serial killer is spreading chaos. Anonymous people with no apparent connections are being murdered while imitating the first appearances of the most famous superheroes. Cosm is the best detective on his station, and he's about to retire against his will. David is his replacement, but he's young and impulsive. Both will be on a mission to put together the pieces of a game they're completely unfamiliar with. On this adventure, they'll have the assistance of Jorge Elias, son of Cosm, who is a lovable nerd and owner of a comic book store, and Norma, their chief and manga and cosplay lover. They say sometimes you have to put on your suit and come out to make this a better world. Maybe this is one of those times. Something to note, this is a Spanish-Argentinian co-production, and it may also be known by the title Secret Origins. It's considered an action crime drama, and it stars Veronica Echegui, who has been on a lot of Spanish television, and Javier Rey, who also has been on a lot of Spanish television. That looks pretty interesting. Then we have some films coming in September. The first one I'm going to talk about is called Enola Homes. And the summary from Netflix is, in England in 1884, it's a time where the world is on the brink of change. On the morning of her 16th birthday, Enola Homes wakes to find that her mother has disappeared, leaving behind an odd assortment of gifts but no apparent clue as to where she's gone or why. After a free-spirited childhood, Enola suddenly finds herself under the care of her brothers Sherlock and Mycroft, both set on sending her away to a finishing school for proper young ladies. Refusing to follow their wishes, Enola escapes to search for her mother in London. But when her journey finds her entangled in a mystery surrounding a young runaway lord, Enola becomes a super sleuth in her own right, outwitting her famous brother as she unravels a conspiracy that threatens to set back the course of history. It's based on the beloved book series by Nancy Springer. Enola Holmes is a dynamic new mystery adventure that introduces the world's greatest detective to his fiercest competition yet, his teenage sister. The game is afoot. So Enola Holmes is Sherlock Holmes' younger sister. She is played by Millie Bobby Brown, and their mother is played by Helena Bonham Carter. And Sherlock Holmes is played by Henry Cavill. For those of you who are Stranger Things fans, Millie Bobby Brown plays Eleven. Helena Bonham Carter has been around for some time. She is known for Planet of the Apes, Big Fish, Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, The King's Speech, and the show The Crown. And Henry Cavill has been seen in I Capture the Castle, The Cold Light of Day, and Justice League, as well as Mission Impossible Fallout. I'm personally excited about this one. I'm big fans of Millie Bobby Brown and Helena Bonham Carter. They're both great actresses. And then later in 2020, a movie is coming out called Cuties. The synopsis, according to Netflix, 11-year-old Amy lives with her mom, Miriam, and younger brother, awaiting her father to rejoin the family from Senegal. Amy is fascinated by disobedient neighbor Angelica's free-spirited dance clique, a group that stands in sharp contrast to stoic Miriam's deeply held traditional values. Undeterred by the girl's initial brutal dismissal and eager to escape her family's simmering dysfunction, Amy, through an ignited awareness of her burgeoning femininity, propels the group to enthusiastically embrace an increasingly sensual dance routine, sparking the girls' hope to twerk their way to stardom at a local dance contest. I'm curious to know more about the Senegalese twist on this story. Another movie coming later in 2020 is called Over the Moon, and according to Netflix, fueled with determination and a passion for science, a bright young girl builds a rocket ship to the moon to prove the existence of a legendary moon goddess. There, she ends up on an unexpected quest and discovers a whimsical land of fantastical creatures. This is directed by animation legend Glenn Keane, and it's produced by Jenny Rim and Peilin Cho. Over the Moon is an exhilarating musical adventure about moving forward, embracing the unexpected, and the power of imagination. And one more coming in 2020, and this will make an even dozen. This movie is called The Princess Switch, Switched Again. And Netflix's summary is, when Duchess Margaret unexpectedly inherits the throne to Montenaro and hits a rough patch with Kevin, it's up to her double Stacy to save the day before a new look-alike party girl Fiona foils their plans. A theme that I'm kind of noticing here is that there are a lot of strong women showing up in roles in these movies. Also worth noting, All of these movies are brand new in 2020. They have not been seen before or been out in theaters before. Sometimes Netflix will add new movies, as we saw with Dark Skies, that originally came out several years ago, but that are new to Netflix. In this case, these are all brand new movies, so it's great new material. Also, as I alluded to before, you can check these out on the Internet Movie Database, and many of them do have trailers and some added information. For those of us who are really looking to movies for escape at this time, it's confirming to know that there are some interesting things coming our way. I hope you enjoyed hearing about the movies Fatal Affair, Dark Skies, and Goldie, as well as some of the upcoming movie releases coming to Netflix. Here's to some happy movie watching. Thank you for listening to the GSMC Movie Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask you to please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review that really helps us. Also, if you can please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. This is Elizabeth Aaron signing out. Thank you, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Movie Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.